There are few people as cold, callous, and calculating as my father. He always derived a thinly veiled sense of sadistic satisfaction from my ceaseless suffering. He was not, by any means, a subtle man. "I'm selling the Xbox," he stated. I can buy it from you, Dad," I begged. I've been saving money." "Is that supposed to impress me?" he snarled. "A kitchen porter. Is that the dream career I envisioned for my son?" "You're 18, Archie. It's time to be an adult. You're too old for video games." My father was an abusive narcissist, so I didn't try to reason with him. That would have been as redundant as begging a baby to quit bawling. Out of context, I might sound like a spoiled brat. That brief snippet of conversation paints my father in the prettiest possible light. Instead, I could talk about the time he demolished my vinyl collection with a cricket bat because, and I quote, "boys shouldn't listen to such baby music." I could talk about the time he brandished a broken beer bottle as a weapon and threatened to kill me. I could talk about far worse things. My father had a monstrous nature, but he was, on that rare occasion, correct. I was hardly a roaring success. I wanted to move out, but my salary would barely have covered the cost of a shed. I lost my mother in 2018. My older sister smartly fled to university, so I had to contend with the barbarous Bruce on my own. That being said, Dad was the least of my worries. What really frightened me was the real world. No, I'm not talking about the world that you know. I'm talking about the video game. You probably haven't heard of it. I couldn't find it online. I couldn't find it anywhere. My father never told me where he bought the game. "Here," he grumbled, tossing a box at me. It was my 19th birthday. The Xbox incident was a distant memory. So you can imagine my shock when I opened the clumsily wrapped present before me and found myself eyeballing a PC game. "You can play it on the computer in the study," my father said. I was bewildered. For a few precious moments, I truly believed that he had a change of heart. Dad remembered my birthday for the first time in years, and he actually gave a present to me. The next sentence shattered that naive illusion. "It's supposed to teach you about life," he explained. "It might get you off your pathetic backside." The chortling creep merrily whistled as he strolled to the living room and sat on his own backside. Nevertheless, as double-edged as the sword seemed, I resolved to play the video game and force myself to enjoy it. I wanted to devote every waking hour to the real world, even if it were a festering pile of rubbish. I wanted to waste away in my desk chair, just to spite my father. As I walked to the study, I read the game's front cover. The real world, a simulation. It was not a descriptive title. The picture on the front of the plastic case displayed a man's black silhouette against a white background. It was hardly a vibrant or enticing graphic, but, of course, it had been sufficient to seize the attention of my dullard dad. I slotted the disc into my computer's CD drive, and I installed the file. The main menu was a sparse screen with only one button: play. There were no options for settings, help, or even basic information about the real world. "Terrible £2 game," I mumbled to myself. But I clicked play. I was plunged into an expansive, yet eerily empty, world of whiteness. The game adopted a third-person perspective, and I was playing as the silhouetted figure from the cover. There were 4 distinct metrics at the bottom of the screen. A green bar above the word life, a blue bar above the word water, an orange bar above the word food, and a yellow bar above the word energy. It should have been a relief to see some colour on the screen. Those bars only served as a worrisome reminder of the disjointed landscape before me. A small text box displayed at the top of the screen. It read, "Welcome to the real world. Survive." The text box disappeared, and small buildings materialised on the not-so-distant horizon. Everything was black and white. The buildings in that monochromatic realm were simply outlined objects. Yet, in spite of the landscape's eerie ambience, I was intrigued. The real world had an original aesthetic. It seemed my father had unintentionally stumbled onto a game which, beyond its superficial nothingness, was actually something. There were 3 buildings. Each had a rudimentary structure. The first bore a sign which read, "Food." The store had 2 wide window panes and a door. Through the shop front, I could see long aisles of shelving and a shopkeeper behind the counter. The second building bore a sign which read, "Medical." The windows were shuttered, concealing its interior. The third building didn't have a sign. Given the thatched roof and picket fence, however, I inferred it to be my character's house. It wasn't much of a world. 3 buildings in a seemingly infinite void of whiteness. I was sure I would tire of the game mechanics quite quickly, but I decided to give the uniquely simplistic simulation a chance. I strolled through the door of the food shop and started to browse the fine selection of digital grub. That isn't sarcasm. There was a surprisingly extensive range of groceries on offer. Whenever I stood before an item of food, a box appeared on the screen and listed various details. Tomato pasta, ready meal. Salt, high. Sugar, medium. 500 calories. Beyond the sparse graphics, the game didn't beg suspension of disbelief, and I cheerfully embraced the needless realism. I was utterly fascinated by the minute details that the game included. I filled my shopping basket and headed to the till. The cashier, an NPC, non-playable character, communicated via text boxes. "Good day, sir. Is that all?" he asked. There were 2 options, yes or no. I picked the former. "Fantastic. The total cost of your shop is 56 tokens, he replied. "Thank you." A -56 tokens pop-up box flashed at the top of the screen to confirm the completion of the transaction. I had no idea how many tokens I owned. The game had not mentioned anything about currency of any kind. What are tokens, I wondered, and how do I earn more? I left the shop and proceeded to the medical building. When I tried to enter the door, however, and a text box explained, "Opening hours are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I looked at the time on my computer, 6:14 p.m. I hadn't expected the game to be a real-time simulator. Regardless, I was content to skip the medical centre. What I really wanted to explore was my character's house. I scooted around the outlined picket fence, sprinted to the door, and swung it open. No need to lock one's door in the middle of a white, featureless expanse, I thought to myself. When I stepped inside, however, my bemused demeanour quickly withdrew. It was my house. My real house. With my heart pounding frantically in my chest, I explored every crevice of the black outlined home. A colourless replica, but everything was the same. though the logical inference was that a horrible trick had been orchestrated by my father. That didn't settle my stomach. Something about the digital rendition of my real-life home had unnerved me. It felt like a violation, an intrusion. It had been intentionally put there to terrify me. I was interrupted by a ravenous rumbling in my belly. It was time to make dinner and confront my father about what was happening. I wanted, more than anything, for him to tell me that he'd specifically designed a fake game to torture me. I would accept that over the horror of the unknown. A second before I closed the game window, however, I noticed something odd. A text box appeared on the screen. "You're hungry. Time to unload your shopping and eat." A bitter chill coursed through my body. I closed the game and switched off my PC. Then I bounded down the stairs and strolled into the kitchen to make dinner. I was the cook. That was the condition I had to fulfill to live in my father's house rent-free. I frequently offered to pay rent, but he always changed the topic of conversation. The man craved control, and the fake simulation game seemed like his latest power trip. I prepared a roast dinner, hoping to put my father in a favourable mood with his favourite meal. I commenced my interrogation as soon as he was sitting. "Where did you find the game?" I asked. "Huh?" he hazily responded. Some website, I don't know. Are you learning some hard truths about reality, eh?" "Dad," I started, "did you commission a custom game to be made for me? How much did it cost?" What?" he asked. "The house in the game. It's a copy of ours," I replied. "I actually think it's pretty cool. Thanks for going to the effort." I don't really understand the joke, Archie," my dad said. "Just Google the name of the game, okay? Kids are supposed to be digital geniuses. Oh, and make sure you wash the dishes first. I'm going to bed." And that was the end of the conversation. I was a little surprised at myself for not thinking to Google the game immediately. It didn't make any difference, though. I found nothing about the real world on the internet. There was only one way to learn more. I had to keep playing. My stomach churned again. I had just wolfed down an entire roast dinner, but I somehow felt even hungrier. I opened a packet of crisps on my desk and started to munch away. Strangely, even after I finished them, I still felt hungry. The real world started and my character was still in the house. No main menu appeared, no play button. My belly wailed. It was becoming insistent. I felt a stabbing pain in my gut, and that pop-up window lingered on the screen, telling me to feed my character. Coincidences usually make me chuckle, but this one horrified me. Dark thoughts swam in my cluttered mind. Horrible ideas of what might be happening to me. One particularly horrible idea, actually. I had to test it. My character was still clutching the bag of shopping, so I strolled over to the fridge and selected the unload option. After browsing the available options in the refrigerator, I chose the tomato pasta ready meal. I microwaved it for a few minutes, served it, seated my character at the dinner table, and selected the pop-up eat option. My character greedily tucked into the bowl of pasta, and his orange food bar suddenly filled up. He drank, and his blue water bar also filled up. Much to my horror, I found that my real-life stomach stopped rumbling. I felt replenished. Worst of all, I could taste the food and water in my mouth. I jolted to my feet, falling backwards and taking my desk chair for the ride. I lay motionless for a few seconds, as I tried to process things. After a few minutes, I realised time wouldn't still my shaking body, so I propped myself on my elbows and looked at the monitor in a state of pure fright. My mind was starting to slip into a state of existential panic. Another text box appeared at the top of the window. "You only have 10 tokens. Would you like to earn more?" The yes and no options had returned. I hesitantly rose to my feet, deeply inhaled, and returned my desk chair to an upright position. After sitting down, I selected the yes option. The text box updated. "You may complete a challenge for 1,000 tokens. Do you accept?" If this digital character truly were a voodoo doll of me, I realised I would only have 2 options. I could run out of the tokens needed to buy digital food, resulting in real-life starvation. Alternatively, I could blindly accept the challenge and stand a chance of living to see another day. I chose survival. Yes. The screen blackened. My body clenched and my breathing quickened. I watched the screen in sheer dread, terrified that I might have broken the game and resigned myself to a fate of death by thirst, starvation, or perhaps even sleep deprivation. I was linked to the voodoo doll in every way, shape, and form. I could feel it. The horrifying consequences of that truth only hit me when the challenge loaded. A timer appeared at the top of the screen. 5 minutes. It started to count down. My silhouetted character returned, but the colours of the game had inverted. He was now a white figure against a black background. White outlines of shapes started to appear on the black screen, and I soon realised that I was faced with an obstacle course. A text box briefly flashed with the words, "Watch your health and energy. Time is slipping away. Run." I didn't need to be told twice. I hammered the up arrow on my keyboard, forcing my character to sprint down the narrow passageway before him. It was a rather derivative and predictable obstacle course. Still, with life or death stakes, those clichés struck me with a sense of terror unlike any I'd ever experienced. I paused, pupils rocking in hypnotic unison with the swaying axis that blocked my path. 4 minutes and 16 seconds on the timer. I couldn't afford the luxury of thinking. I had to act. I barreled my character recklessly through the sea of swinging blades, and I held my breath until I safely made it to the other side. Feeling confident, I bravely squared up to the next challenge. A pond filled with the mysterious white outlines of unknown creatures. Lily pads formed a path to safety. I leapfrogged across. 3 minutes and 49 seconds. I could already see the doorway with "Finish" written above it. Just a few more obstacles. Why did I suddenly feel completely fatigued? My energy bar, it was empty. A text box popped up. "You will be penalised for moving too quickly." A moment later, my character was levitating. I felt my stomach lurch, and I realised that I was no longer sitting on my desk chair. As if gravity had left the room, my real-life body started to lift into the air. I found myself suspended a few feet above the carpet of the study. I didn't want to call for help from my abusive father. Even if I had done that, the coward would have scarpered and never returned. Plus, for all I knew, he had purposefully dabbled in some dark ritual to create the game. My torture could have been exactly what he had planned. Instead, I bit my quivering lip so viciously that it drew warm blood. Crimson droplets started to trickle down my chin. A stream of tears broke through the floodgates, soaking my cheeks. I watched the character on my screen, waiting to see what horrendous fate awaited the pair of us. 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Another pop-up appeared. To recover your energy, choose a handicap. I didn't understand the instruction, but the game remedied that by putting 2 options on the screen. Lose 40 seconds on the timer, or twist an ankle. I couldn't afford to lose another 40 seconds. I was already wasting time. I stretched my hand forwards, still hovering in the air. I desperately wrestled with the paranormal force that had suspended me, and I managed to grab the mouse, wiggling the cursor onto the second option. Twisting an ankle would be painful, but I had a terrible feeling that it might cost my life to lose the challenge. After all, what would I do without the tokens? How would I keep my voodoo doll alive? I selected twist an ankle. What followed was the most horrific experience of my life. I expected a sprain. What I was actually given was a mutilation. An invisible entity vehemently snapped my left ankle, slowly twisting my foot until it was facing the wrong direction. My bone protruded through a bloody, gaping wound above my heel. I screamed at the top of my lungs. I screamed until I threw up. My father shouted something from downstairs. I couldn't hear him over my agonised wailing. I was certain, in that moment, of his guilt. I envisioned him slumped in the collapsed sofa cushion that had buckled under his weight over the years. I hoped, without me to look after him, that he would rot in that very seat. Gravity returned, and I fell into my desk chair. My left leg had been rendered a twitching, immobilised mess. My character looked much the same as me. 2 minutes and 51 seconds remained. Feeling faint, I placed my unsteady hands on the keyboard and pushed my character forwards at a much slower pace. I made it through a passage of deadly darts, and all that remained was a small stretch of hallway which led to the exit. 1 minute and 17 seconds. I hobbled forwards, screeching in agony at the blazing sensation in my left ankle. My character was waddling at a glacial pace. 59 seconds. Suddenly, the walls of the passageway started to move inwards. They were closing on my character. They were closing on me. No, I whimpered. Being compressed into a meat patty between 2 walls seemed like a death too excruciating to possibly imagine. 41 seconds. I was confident that I could reach the door in less than 41 seconds, but only if I hadn't been pancaked by the walls before then. 30 seconds. The walls were starting to graze my character's shoulder blades. I couldn't move quickly enough. I could feel an invisible pressure against my real shoulders. I started to accept my fate. Pain surged through my upper body. I heard cracking sounds in my joints, so I started to fold my arms inwards, attempting to prevent any other limbs from being mangled. In a miraculous turn of events, the wall stopped moving. I found myself squeezing through a narrow sliver of a passage, but I hadn't been crushed. I was alive. 12 seconds. Just a few more steps. 8 seconds. 3 seconds. I made it. I reached the door. The screen turned white, and my character returned to his house. I'd never been so happy to see an award on a video game. You earned plus 1,000 tokens. I sobbed triumphantly, clumsily pulling out my phone and calling an ambulance. I don't remember seeing my father, but I remember the paramedics arriving. The problem is that I wasn't thinking clearly. I'd lost so much blood. I forgot that I needed to keep playing the simulation. When I woke, I was trapped in the hospital. My ankle had been fixed, in a sense, but it certainly wasn't operational. After surgery, I slept for half a day, according to the nurse. But I was exhausted when I woke. I could feel hunger pangs. I hadn't eaten or slept in the game. I didn't know how much longer I could leave my character unattended. I had two options. I could either play the real world until my dying day, or I could find a way to break the curse. I chose the latter. My character was withering away, and I was following suit. I couldn't keep living that way. I did try to resolve the situation before leaving the hospital. I called my girlfriend, Darcy, and asked her to play the game for me. I explained everything. She didn't accuse me of lying, but she thought I'd bumped my head and imagined the entire ordeal. She suggested psychiatric help. Unwilling to sound demented and scare her away, I promised I would do whatever she wanted. I just wanted her to go to my house and take care of my character. "I'll go and check on your game," she said. "Thank you. I love you," I replied. "I'm coming to the hospital after work, though. I want to see you, Archie." "I love you." That was the last thing Darcy said before hanging up. When she stopped replying to my texts, I found myself succumbing to intrusive thoughts. I had to go home. As I hobbled out of the hospital on crutches, I looked down at my left foot, which was held together by a metal rod. There was no evidence that, less than a day prior, it had been a miserable mess, and yet I experienced a phantom sensation. My foot still felt as if it were twisted around. I still endured excruciating pain. I need to take my injured character to the medical centre, I realised. A taxi arrived to take me home. The driver attempted to engage in small talk about my injury, but my mind was vacant. My eyesight was blurry, and there was a pulsating rhythm behind my eyes. A mighty migraine. I was experiencing dehydration, hunger, sleep deprivation, and, possibly, blood loss. My character was dying, and I was dying. It didn't matter that the hospital had patched me up. I needed to visit the hospital in the video game to save my voodoo doll. When I leapt out of the taxi, I was on the verge of passing out. I burst through the front door of my house, ready to apprehend my father and ask him what he had done to me. He wasn't home. I didn't think anything of it. I was close to collapsing. So I sprinted to the study and found that the game window for the real world was still open. I slumped into my chair and hurriedly raced into action. Drink was my first move. My real throat soon felt soothed. Eat followed. The searing pain in my stomach subsided. Then I moved my character to the upstairs bedroom and selected sleep. Though I remained awake in our world, I could feel myself reaping the benefits of my character's sleep. I slowly started to feel revitalised. My ankle throbbed angrily, but that had seemed inconsequential in comparison to the severe sleep deprivation and dehydration. I survived by the skin of my teeth. The knot in my chest started to loosen, if only a little. Everything in the real world happens in real time, so I realised I would have to leave my character in bed for several hours. I was still drained of energy, but but after an hour or so of digital sleep, I no longer felt entirely depleted. My character's energy bar was gradually filling. I decided that it was time to figure out how to end the madness. I had work to do. Of course, I didn't want to exert too much real-life energy. I still wasn't exactly sure of the mechanics behind computerized voodoo doll magic. And that was why I started to browse the internet on my phone, searching for answers. There was no time to waste. On a forum about the world of the occult, I found a user, guest 17, who told me about something called veil breaking. It's the act of retrieving a soul from the land of the dead. I told guest 17 that it didn't really seem applicable to my predicament. He replied, "Veil breaking allows you to move your soul between realities. It might detach you from the voodoo doll, and that your soul seems to currently be tied to it." I wasn't buying any of that nonsense. I had no idiotic intention to add more curses to the pile. That being said, it wasn't a fruitless chat. I knew I needed some sort of solution in the realm of magic, so I asked guest 17 how he knew so much about veil breaking. He moved away from the public post and messaged me privately. "Not everything's on Google, you know." A link was attached. It was an invitation to a Discord server called XI. I knew it was sketchy, but I was out of options. I couldn't depend on a video game for the rest of my life. I couldn't keep completing deadly challenges, living every moment in utter dread. I accepted the invite. The XI server had 547 members, and they seemed obsessed with all manner of supernatural things. There were numerous rooms. Discussion, entities, exorcisms, heart charms, navigators of the void, veil breaking, voodoo, witchcraft, 11. I immediately clicked on the voodoo tab and started to type out the details of my situation. I knew nothing of the supernatural, but it certainly seemed that someone had made a virtual voodoo doll of me. I hoped a member of the Discord server might be able to help. The first reply was a little harsh. RN 1980. Voodoo dolls aren't actually linked to voodoo culture, you filthy casual. Who let you onto this server? It's private. Fortunately, one of the other replies was a little friendlier. Tuscan. RN 1980 is right, but he's also a moron. You're in serious danger, Archie. Digital magic is the specialty of RIP 78. Feeling hopeful, I messaged RIP 78. I waited and waited. No reply. Around 3 in the afternoon, 6 hours after returning from the hospital, my stomach started to rumble. My character was sleeping, and he ate before going to bed. I inspected the game window for the real world, and my jaw froze. My character's food bar was practically full. It dawned on me that I didn't just have to keep myself alive in the game. I still had to eat, drink, and sleep in the real world. I would have to survive through 2 different bodies. In real life, I stumbled into my darkened kitchen, paralysed by a feverish feeling of powerlessness. How long can I keep this up? I wondered, as I watched the ready meal that was spinning in the microwave. I would have to keep performing deadly challenges to earn tokens, and I would also have to keep working in the real world to earn money. My manager had taken me off the rota at the restaurant whilst I recovered, but there were still real-life bills to be paid, and it seemed my father had finally left town, so he wasn't going to be paying his way. I returned to the study, tucking into my bowl of macaroni and cheese. Still no response from RIP 78. Whilst I waited, I decided that I had to do something about the agonising pain in my foot. It had been treated in the real world, but it it still had that phantom sensation of being mutilated. I looked at the game window. My character's health bar had been depleted to the extent that it was orange in colour. If I could heal him, my real-world pain would cease. I knew it. I decided that 6 hours of rest would be sufficient, so I tore my character out of bed. It was time to finally explore the medical building. I had to be quick. I didn't want it to shut. My character limped out of the front door, facing the white void of the game's horrendous hellscape. Turning to my right, I walked towards the medical building beside me. This time the door wasn't locked. I entered the hospital, feeling uneasy about the potential horrors that might lie within the outlined building. I had expected a local health clinic. I had expected to be told that I needed to ring and come back when I had an appointment. Instead, I was faced with an enormous hospital. The waiting area was overflowing with silhouetted NPCs. It was even more detailed than the shop next door. And yet, the place did not brim with life. There had been jolly elevator-style music in the food store. In the medical building, on the other hand, there were sparse, dissonant piano notes playing. The background music filled me with sorrow and horror in equal measure. Additionally, like a TARDIS, the building was far larger on the inside. In the centre of the open-plan ground floor, there was a staircase which led to numerous levels. Moving my character's point of view upwards, I could see the entire interior of the hospital. The staircase zigzagged upwards. I counted 6 levels. Remembering why I came, I walked over to the reception desk. I prayed for a brief break from realism. No waiting times, no need for appointments, just let me see a doctor. My wish was granted. The silhouetted woman spoke through text boxes, much like the cashier at the food shop. "Hello, my name's Kira. How may I help you?" "I need to see a doctor," or "I want to volunteer." The second option unnerved me. Volunteer to do what? I wondered. I selected the first option, obviously. "Dr. Ted will see you on the 3rd floor, room 319. That'll cost 500 tokens. Thank you." Yep, I thought, watching the -500 tokens pop-up window come and go. I practically crawled upstairs, trying my very best to ignore the haunting piano music that filled the eerie, colourless, outlined building. I thought about muting the game, believe me, but 2 things stopped me. Firstly, I didn't want to be penalised again. I might not have survived another trip to the hospital. Secondly, I didn't want to miss anything. For all I knew, if I were to mute the game, I might overlook something. I decided to soldier onwards, weaving in and out of silhouetted doctors and civilians. When I reached the 3rd floor, I followed the numbers until I arrived at room 319. The door was open. I strolled inside, and a silhouetted doctor was waiting for me. Text box appeared. "My name is Dr. Ted. What seems to be the problem? I have a headache, I have a mental health issue, or I severed a bone in the challenge." I selected the gruesome and sadistically specific option at the bottom. It felt as if the game were mocking me. It knew exactly why I had come into the medical building. I was horrified by the prospect of some intelligent entity watching my every move. Another text box popped up. "Okay, let me have a look. That's an easy fix." Seconds later, the pain in my real-life ankle subsided. My character stood upright, seemingly better. The doctor's final text box read, "Come again, Archie Bolton." My blood turned to ice in my veins. I'd never given my name whilst playing the game. The real world knew me. Of course. Why should I be so shocked by that? And yet, something about seeing my name on the screen made the curse feel so much more unbelievably frightening. The torture felt personal. With full bars across the board, I exited room 319 and tentatively strolled over to the third floor balcony. There was still no reply from RIP 78. I was panicking. I had to understand the mechanics of the real world. If I could figure out the game, I could beat it. That was when I noticed something. The dissonant piano was no longer the only audible sound in the hospital. I could hear voices. Shouting. I saw movement on the other side of the building. NPCs were dragging two squirming silhouettes along the second floor hallway. "Where are we?" a girl wailed. "Let me go!" a man bellowed. I immediately recognised both voices. The girl was Darcy, and the man was my father. Unable to accept this dreadful twist in the game's hellish storyline, I found myself disassociating. A ringing noise flooded my ears, and I fervently struggled to process what was happening. I scrambled for some sort of explanation. I ran down the hospital stairs, exiting onto the second floor. Pursuing the silhouetted figures from a safe distance, I hoped with every fibre of my being to ascertain that they were not, in fact, capturing my girlfriend and my father. The large group of striding shadows entered a door on their right. The sign above it read, "Surgery." I burst through the doorway, throwing caution to the wind in my blind panic. Beyond the door, there was yet another narrow passageway, and I could hear Darcy at the end of the corridor. She was bawling her eyes out. "Darcy!" I yelled. She didn't respond, but she kept crying. I had a microphone connected to my computer, but I realised that Darcy couldn't hear me. The game had no settings. There was no option to switch a microphone on or off. I was unable to communicate. I could only watch in silence as the 5 silhouetted NPCs dragged Darcy and my father into an operating room on their left. Long windows spanned the entire hallway, so I could see into the room. My hands froze on the keyboard. I stood and watched. The voices within the room were muffled, but Darcy was shouting at such volume that I could hear her clearly. "What have you done to us? What is this place?" she cried. "I'll kill you," my father raged. The 5 silent NPCs started to strap my girlfriend and my father to 2 separate operating tables. The hospital's background music became foreground music. The slightly out-of-tune piano plinks relentlessly resonated atop the screams of the 2 victims. Even in such a desolate world of outlined shapes, painted against a white backdrop, everything felt real. In fact, what followed was the most real thing I've ever seen. A pop-up box appeared on my screen. It read, "How should we proceed? Save them? That'll cost 10,000 tokens. Or kill them? You will gain 10,000 tokens." I repeatedly clicked save them, but the same message incessantly popped up. "Insufficient tokens." "Give me a challenge," I cried at the screen, tears rolling down my cheeks. Another window popped up. "Only the original player can operate the simulated character. Unauthorized players must face trial in the real world. Select an option. Save them or kill them." I placed my face in my palms and sobbed. Truthfully, I didn't give a moment's thought to my villainous father. I was thinking of Darcy. Only Darcy. The beautiful red-headed girl who radiated such warmth and vibrant colour. She was reduced to a black silhouette, writhing on an outlined operating table. A new window appeared. Pick an option. You have 10 seconds. No. The offer has timed out. The real world has chosen to kill them.
No!
I screeched. One of the figures picked up a large bucket and started pouring a white liquid with a black outline over Darcy's body. Horrifyingly, as loudly as she screamed, her voice was mostly lost in the sea of piercing piano notes that seemed to be building towards a vile crescendo. As the piano played, cheapening the very real terror that my girlfriend was enduring, I had never felt so utterly powerless and petrified. She emitted a screech that I am sure barely began to express the grueling brutality of her suffering. As the white liquid poured over Darcy, her body started to melt, transforming from a rigid silhouette into a formless pool of black liquid. Her final pained wail swiftly disintegrated into a haunting warbling whisper, as if she were gargling water. Darcy became a black, gooey liquid that trickled down the sides of the outlined operating table. I could not speak. I could not blink. I could not move.
Don't you bring that near me!
My father growled.
No, let me, no.
I hated him. I hated my father more than I'd ever hated anything. He bought the real world as a form of psychological torture, even if he hadn't quite anticipated the supernatural horrors that would unfold. It was his fault that Darcy was dead.
Hey, wait, who's watching? Who's watching me? Is Archie? Archie, is that you? Archie, are you playing the game, Archie?
I didn't respond. I was completely devoid of feeling for the monster in the shackles.
Archie?
My father gasped, seemingly stung by my inaction. He soon showed his true colours.
You waste of space,
he yelled.
I nearly smothered you in your sleep when you were a child. I could have crushed you like a bug. I should have done it.
I locked my gaze onto Darcy's liquefied body, tears stinging my eyes and dread consuming my heart, as the NPC with the bucket started to pour the liquid onto my father. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him melt into the same pool of gore as Darcy. Though I despised him, it was a gruesome sight. His screams rapidly dissipated. He became liquid. Everything was still. There was no sound other than the sinister piano melody that persisted. I wiped the tears from my eyes and looked at my screen. As I watched the NPCs, my heart started to thump forcefully against the inside of my ribcage. The motionless silhouettes were facing the window to the operating room. They were facing me. In our world, my phone buzzed. RIP78 had replied. I didn't have time to read the message. The figures had started to exit the operating room. I ran towards the hallway door, and I sprinted onto the second floor balcony. All of the NPCs in the medical building were immobilized. Their bodies, however, swiveled on the spot, so they were always facing my character. Avoiding them, I ran down the stairs of the ginormous medical building. I didn't know whether the 5 silhouetted monsters from the operating room were still chasing me. and I didn't stop to check. As I launched across the main lobby, I weaved between the spinning statues. The terrifying NPCs littered the waiting area, and they followed my every move with their empty faces. I exited the building, turned left, and tried to ignore the splitting pain in my sides. My energy bar was rapidly draining. I was surprised to find my house unlocked, as I thought the game might simply leave me to whatever torturous fate the NPCs had in mind. The second I was inside my character's home, I closed the door, selected the lock option, and backed towards the kitchen. Multiple text boxes popped up, indicating that the 5 murderous NPCs were, in fact, at my front door. Open! Open the door. Do you want to earn 5,000 tokens? Open the door. Forget the others. Just open the door for me. 50,000 tokens? I ran to the fridge and looked inside. It was empty. Instead, I filled a glass of water from the tap. Both my water and energy bars started to replenish. But I was so hungry. Then, a window popped up. For the sake of realism and immersion, certain food items are kept outside of the fridge. Suddenly, there was a bouncing arrow over the fruit bowl on my character's dining table. There were still some pixelated apples inside the bowl. I ran over, selected Eat, and breathed a sigh of relief as the ache in my real guts began to ease. My character's food bar quickly filled up. Another pop-up window appeared. Uh-oh! Something was wrong with that fruit. As my character bent forwards and started to projectile vomit a black substance, I felt an unsettled grumble in my real-life stomach. Closing my eyes, I expected vomit, but I should have known that the sinister simulation would have something much more sickening in store for me. I bent forwards, mirroring my character's position, feeling a blazing sensation in the back of my throat. I vomited a thick, black, sticky substance that looked identical to the one my character had just produced. Knees knocking together as I trembled in terror, a second wave of black vomit, thicker in consistency, flew from my mouth. This time, something terrible was moving in the black substance that coated my computer desk. Caterpillars. Hundreds of caterpillars, wriggling and drowning in the unidentifiable black bile. They had come out of me. Fearfully eyeing the awful scene before me, I was even more horrified to see the caterpillars slowly morph into black goo, much like my father and Darcy. They became one with the evil substance that was dripping from the edge of my desk. The creatures unleashed a tiny chorus of haunting wails as they melted. I was taunted by another pop-up message. Whoops! You can't always trust fruit. It looks like some hungry little caterpillars found their way into your apples. With my sleeve, I wiped the repulsive bile from my lips and finally scooped up my phone. It was time to see whether this mystery expert could save me. I opened Discord. RIP 78. Firstly, don't delete the game. It needs to be destroyed with a ritual. We're not just trying to eliminate the effigy. We're trying to sever the connection between you and it. I'm sorry for the late reply, but I've spent the last few hours developing a game extension for you. It's essentially a virus. Put the attachment in the main folder for the real world. I know you shouldn't download files from a stranger, but you don't really have any other options. Time is not your friend. You're going to have to trust me. The attachment was titled ritual.gc. I asked him about the file extension, I'm not a tech whiz, but I'd never seen the GC file type before. RIP78. It's grey code. Take a look in the folder for the real world. I did. There was only one file in the folder. index.gc. RIP78. Grey code is the worst kind of magic. Mankind's attempt to combine technology with the supernatural realm. I don't know whether my virus can help, but, well, the knowledge I have at my disposal, this is the best I can do. I downloaded the file and put it into the folder. RIP78. Good. Right. I developed a 2-part ritual in grey code. It's based on things I read about destroying physical voodoo dolls, so I pray it works for digital effigies. After you've installed my extension, you're going to cleanse your character with fire. Following that, you're going to cleanse him with water. You won't have much time to complete the ritual. The entity is going to fight hard to keep you as its host. The next pop-up window read, "Extension has been successfully installed. Cheat code detected. Penalty for seeking help outside of the simulation. Break a leg? That'll cost 10,000 tokens. Or lose an eye? You will earn 100,000 tokens." I didn't have 10,000 tokens. The game knew that. RIP78. Ignore its demands, Archie. Focus on the ritual. This is good news. It means the installation of my extension has worked. I told you that the game wouldn't give up without a fight. Just keep going. You should see the colourful doorway that I created. Suddenly, a pixelated golden doorway appeared in the middle of the kitchen. I was a little mesmerised by the sudden burst of colour on my screen. Another pop-up window read, "Do not enter." The door oozed with warmth in the midst of that barren black and white outlined environment. Finally, I had found a tiny spark of hope in the heart of that dismal place. Then, a new text box violently popped up. "Your offer has timed out. You do not have 10,000 tokens. The real world has selected the only available option. Congratulations, you're about to earn 100,000 tokens. You have chosen to lose an eye." My body clammed up. Flooded with a feeling of revulsion, I started to notice a sensation at the back of my retina. It was a prodding feeling, as if someone were gently tapping a ball with a snooker cue. The gentleness quickly transformed to brutish thumping. Ah! I wailed in agony, clutching my left eye with both hands and desperately trying to stop it from being forcefully removed from its socket. Ah! As the ripping continued, I was bombarded by tidal waves of indescribable pain. My phone was pinging with messages from RIP78, but I couldn't respond. I was flailing wildly on my desk chair, futilely striving to save my eye. I felt something warm trickle down my hands. Blood. Over my piercing screeches of agony, I could barely hear the squelching noise of my eye being peeled from its home. Eventually, there was an unimaginably painful tug, and I was suddenly cupping my left eyeball in both of my hands. Half of my vision was gone. I lowered my limp palms, and I watched my eyeball swimming in a murky river of blood. A river which was fed by the cascading waterfall from my empty eye socket. I looked at the monitor with my remaining eye, and saw my character clawing at his face in horror. I didn't think the silhouettes even had eyes to lose, but I was wrong. Another window popped up. "Would you like emergency medical care to stop the bleeding? For 100,000 tokens. Of course. Nothing had been gained from that horror. Twitching in a mixture of pain and shock, I shakily moved the cursor over to yes and clicked. The dripping from my eye sockets abruptly halted. Something had stemmed the bleeding. I did not dare look in a mirror. I thought that might make me pass out. Rip 78. Tell me what's happening. You need to go through the door, Archie. The entity is trying to destroy my code. I don't know how much time you have. I started to move my character towards the doorway. The game hurled numerous pop-up windows at me, obscuring my field of view. All of your tokens have been deducted. -50 energy. Stop. You need rest. You will be penalised. Pushing forwards, lethargically, I trudged through the golden door. The chaos ceased. The pop-up windows vanished, and the metrics at the bottom of my screen were full again. I found myself in a pitch-black void, which was lit by a circle of 11 pixelated candles. They faintly illuminated my silhouetted character, who was mostly submerged in the darkness of the endless, empty landscape. Rip 78. Okay, you're in the room I created. I included some code to keep your bars full for a little while, but we need to be quick. Pick up one of the candles and set your character on fire. This should cleanse your effigy, the video game character. The game will no longer have a link to the inner workings of your real body. I immediately moved my character over to one of the candles. The option Set Self Ablaze appeared, but before I had a chance to click anything, a window abruptly popped up. Penalty. Without any instructions or offers, the toll was extracted. My left wrist suddenly snapped backwards. I yelped in pain, and one meagre tear trickled from the duct of my surviving eye. I had nothing left to give. I was solemnly striding into the eternal embrace of death. My left hand was bending backwards over my wrist. It was completely incapacitated. I continued moving my mouse with my right hand. I clicked on the option to set self ablaze. My character combusted in less than a second, and I winced, bracing for the same real-life fate. But nothing happened. I didn't feel the scorch of fire against my skin. Within moments, the digital inferno extinguished, as did the 11 candles which encircled my character. He was no longer drowning in the darkness. My black silhouetted effigy had been reborn as a white silhouette. Rip 78. Okay, the first step of the ritual worked. You've severed the tie between your insides and the doll's insides. The game can't starve or exhaust you, but your outer body is still connected to this entity. The game can still hurt you. Archie, I think you need to send me your home address. I need to call an ambulance for you. Your injuries sound serious. When this is over, you'll need help. Throwing online safety out of the window, I sent what looked like my address, though my eyesight was hazy and unreliable. As if the real world could see our conversation outside of the game, however, another window displayed on the screen. Complete challenge for 1 million tokens? I wasn't even given any options to choose. The window simply disappeared, replacing itself with one that read, You selected yes. Rip 78's black landscape reverted to the white one of the real world, the one with which I was so familiar. My white silhouette remained, but he gained a black outline, much like the objects that were forming across the game's environment. Rip 78. It's rewriting part of my code. The lake should be safe for now. I protected it. However, time is slipping away from us, Archie. This is the last part of the ritual. Enter the lake, cleanse your character, and your digital effigy should safely disintegrate, severing your tie with the game once and for all. That sounded wonderful, but RIP-78 couldn't see what I could see. A maze was starting to construct itself, and I had a feeling that the real world was concealing the lake at the heart of the looming labyrinth. This was the challenge. RIP-78. Don't trust the game, Archie. It doesn't want you to reach the lake. It wants to keep you trapped. Forever. I ignored the Discord user's warning, and I entered the obstacle course of cruelty. I had no idea which way to turn, but the game had a sadistic solution for that. The correct route will now be highlighted, and obstacles on dangerous routes will be activated. I looked at my broken wrist and tenderly raised my right hand towards my mangled left eye. I was in no fit state for another challenge. There were 2 passageways before me. Spikes rose from the floor and walls of the right-hand route. Drawing a deep breath, I started to move my character towards the left passageway. But then I stopped. What had RIP-78 said? Don't trust the game. It wanted me to avoid the dangerous route. It wanted me to take the safe passage. I looked at the spikes on the digital floor. Eyeballing my real-life feet, I felt my lip quiver in fear. This is going to hurt, I whispered to myself. I summoned my remaining bravery and charged along the right-hand route. The spikes were small, but they were sharp. Each digital step inflicted a fresh wound upon my real-life skin, electrifying the nerve endings of my feet. A growing puddle of blood soaked into the carpet of the study, but my eyes were firmly fixed on the game window. Reaching the end of the spiked passageway, I exhaled ecstatically. With renewed confidence and purpose, I pushed forwards. The next dangerous route was filled with the slithering, pixelated outlines of small snakes. A pop-up window appeared. Take the safe path to avoid a penalty. I ignored it and pushed my character towards the narrow tunnel of hissing snakes. Slinking between the virtual creatures, I foolishly believed I might actually pass through the passage unscathed. I was woefully wrong. I screamed. One of them bit me. Surprisingly, it hurt less than the spikes, but I'd been psychologically prepared for those. I hadn't prepared myself for the possibility of being bitten. My character hopped from side to side in pain, and I stubbornly stifled my real-life tears. I refused to let the game win. I kept my pain to myself, though it was certainly raw and unyielding. The game informed me of something dreadful. Whoops! That snake was venomous. It looks like you need to administer an antidote within the next 60 seconds. I felt feverish, and I had a horrible hunch that it was nothing to do with the wave of fear coursing through my veins. Something else was invading my body. Buy an antidote for 1 million tokens. Or sacrifice a friend to gain a free antidote. A black silhouetted figure fell from the top of the screen, plummeting to the patch of digital ground before my character. A voice started to sound over the speakers. Archie! The man cried. It's Steve! RIP-78! The game has trapped me in here, but if you type the following sequence on your keyboard, you can save me. It's... His talking ceased. Steve's pleas continued, but they were reduced to muffles, as if the vile video game had sealed his mouth. Before I had a chance to act, the game chose for me. You do not have sufficient tokens for an antidote. You have chosen to sacrifice a friend. I didn't know whether I could live with another death on my conscience. Filled with terror, I begged the malevolent game to reconsider. "Wait," I said. "May I choose to not receive an antidote?" There was a pause. Steve's silhouetted figure was squirming on the floor of the maze, pinned down by an invisible force. The game presented another text box. "Suicide is not an option. You have chosen to sacrifice a friend." Was he a friend? I didn't know him, but he fought to save my life. Steve felt like a friend, and his death was a truly harrowing spectacle. His black, featureless body writhed vigorously on the ground. It was a valiant struggle, but Steve's arms and legs were plucked quickly and cleanly from his torso, as if some demented psychopath were butchering a microscopic ant on the playground. Without the antidote, I was starting to fade. That was a blessing. It meant I barely registered Steve's final, torturous moments of life. His screams, though mostly muted, were deafening. And the invisible force hoisted his squirming, de-limbed, pixelated form into the air, presenting it to me as some sort of trophy. Steve's movements slowed. His screams started to quieten. Seconds later, he was silent and still. "Payment has been received. Antidote has been administered." I was alive. Barely. It was still impossible to ignore the pain in my eye socket, wrist, and feet. Everything was throbbing, but I wouldn't quit. The deaths wouldn't be meaningless. I turned a corner, and I saw it. The lake. A blue pool with a black outline. Much like the golden doorway, it shone vividly in the centre of that lifeless landscape. There was a narrow corridor leading towards it. "Turn back," the entity demanded. I didn't pay attention. I marched forwards, but one final text box stopped me before I reached the lake. "Resurrect Darcy for 0 tokens? Veil breaking is a free bonus feature of this incredible simulation. Her soul can be retrieved from beyond the veil." My heart pounded wildly. I closed my remaining eye and saw Darcy's face. Her luscious red hair. Her pure smile. And then I saw something else. The dripping black liquid to which she'd been reduced. I thought of Rip 78's message. "Don't trust the game." "No," I firmly said. On the verge of passing out from a toxic mixture of traumatic stress, agonizing pain, and excessive blood loss, I moved my character forwards. I took purposeful strides into the lake. A piercing piano note rang through my computer speakers, pummeling my eardrums. I'm not sure what caused it. It sounded as if it were a cacophonous cry of the game itself. A death cry. I dismissed it, continuing to submerge my character beneath the surface of the lake. And the piano note dissipated. My voodoo doll's black outline slowly started to dissolve in the water, and his white silhouetted body disintegrated. In a matter of moments, there was nothing left of the effigy. I was free from the cursed clutches of the real world, but I was barely clinging to life. "You're dying with me," I said. One last pop-up appeared. "Don't do it! You'll never be free. You'll always belong to the real world." I closed the game window. Reaching beneath the desk, I pressed the eject button above my computer's CD drive. Seizing the disc that had caused untold suffering over the past 24 hours, I felt nauseated by a horrible realization. What if it kills me? Before I had a chance to reconsider, I bent the sides of the disc inwards, using my only working hand. It snapped, but that wasn't enough. I had to burn it. Fire cleanses everything, Steve said. So, I weakly reached for the lighter on my desk. My father's lighter. In the end, he was of some use. After igniting the tiny flame, I held it to the disc that I had placed on the desk. The fire scorched the label a little, but it wasn't sufficient to burn through the plastic. Life draining from my wounded body, I practically crawled into the kitchen. I grabbed a half-empty bottle of vodka from a party that seemed a lifetime ago, and I doused the disc in it. Then, my eyes shot to the microwave. "Now there's an idea," I deliriously said. I opened the microwave door, tossed the disc inside, and, for good measure, added a little more alcohol. I looked at the lighter. I didn't want to reach my one working hand inside the microwave and injure it. So, I set an envelope on fire, threw it inside the microwave, and swiftly slammed the door shut. Flames started to roar within the enclosed space, but it still wasn't good enough. I had to be sure that the ghoulish game had really died. I started the microwave. It would be safe to say that carnage ensued. I remember a chaotic series of crackles and bangs. I remember smoke. I don't remember much else, however, because my eyesight started to fade, and I fell to the kitchen floor. I woke in a hospital bed. The staff were concerned to see me again, of course. There had been no sign of my father, and I'd been to the hospital with severe injuries 2 times in the space of a day. He was no stranger to domestic abuse charges, so I let the hospital staff and the police draw their own conclusions as to what had happened to me. My father was believed to have fled. It was harder to lie to Darcy's parents. They told me that she'd gone missing, and they wanted to know whether she'd contacted me. The coincidental timing of her disappearance and my hospital trip wasn't lost on them, but no charges were ever pressed. They never truly believed I would ever do anything to harm her. Right now I'm lying in a hospital bed. My left eye socket is bandaged, so I'm relieved that I don't have to see the gory mess beneath. My left wrist has been fitted with a metal rod to match the one in my left ankle. This morning, I asked one of the paramedics whether the disc had been destroyed. They said half of the kitchen had been destroyed. That sounded promising to me, but I need to find whoever sold the real world to my father. I'll never stop searching for answers. In honour of Darcy and Steve, I have to find whoever did this to us. Is it all over? I think so. And yet, every time I feel a pang of hunger, or I start to yawn, I can't help but shudder at the slight possibility that the game has not released me.